This is the Journey Podcast. We highlight the journeys of our guests, where they've been, where they are now, and where they are going. Let's join them on their journey. And welcome to the Journey Podcast. Today we have a really interesting guest with us, Lee of Cognitive Athlete. And Lee has combined the idea of coaching athletes and coaching business owners. And through that, he has some very interesting perspectives that he shared with me in preparing for today's episode. And he's brought that perspective of coaching athletes into the business coaching space. And he draws on his personal experience and his of business, and also his passion for family to help others grow in their business and be present at home at the same time. So something that's near and dear to my heart, finding that work-life balance for a business owner. Thanks for being with us today, Lee. How you doing?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you for the intro, and thank you for the invite to be on your show.
So, and as they, I believe they say in Europe, Lee is our first guest on the journey from across the pond. So thanks for being with us today. He is in Spain, and it's neat to have you here and kind of span that cultural gap and see what things are different, but also similar there. And we're also struggling with the same things here in the U.S., where we primarily have a U.S. audience here on the journey of just that work-life balance. So tell us a little bit more about Cognitive Athlete and what you do.
Okay, so my background is in human performance, and I started off with working with athletes in their strength and conditioning and being in the gym. And most of my life was in soccer, or as we call it, football, and then I did some in professional rugby, a little bit in tennis and ice hockey, and lots of different aspects or lots of different sports. And then kind of in 2016, made the jump across from working with athletes into business. I moved into a performance company where they had two sides of the business, and kind of got pushed over to work with CEOs and C-suites, and then realized quite quickly that there's lots of similarities between high-level business and elite athletes, elite sports. And now if I think back to it, when I first started coaching, early 2000s, all I was interested in was trying to make the athlete physically better. So we're looking at strength numbers, how fast they were moving, how high they were jumping. But now I think that there's a little bit of a better understanding that everybody is a human being, and therefore it's a holistic approach. So for example, if my athlete had had an argument the night before, or was late into training, or for whatever reason, that would then affect their performance in the gym. So as coaches now, we need to be a bit more aware of what's going on outside the realm of the training environment. And how that now relates to business is that if you're a business leader, you imagine that your staff are going through stress or going through problems, then that is going to affect them in a working environment, if they're in the office or they're trying to work from home. And that's kind of what I do, is I help business leaders develop methods or principles around how to improve the human in the business. Not so much about business coaching and processes and systems and profit and loss and all those areas. I'm really concerned at looking at how we can improve the human in the business. And that's it in a nutshell.
So if the mental isn't performing right for the business leader, they're not going to be able to do their tasks, manage their team effectively. And so that's really your focus there. Am I correct?
Yes. And also looking at kind of the body, we know that the body and mind is linked. We know now that if you are physically active, if you're a fit individual, that you have a greater stress tolerance or a greater level of stress that you can take on your body. And unfortunately, what we see is that with businesses, as stress increases or workload increases, the first thing that normally goes is your sleep. And then the second thing that normally goes is your physical activity. And what we're trying to do there is we're trying to encouraging the people that we work with and say, hey, look, no, your kind of foundations of performance, so your sleep, physical activity, nutrition, your cognitive performance are all needs to be rocks that you rely on, foundations that you rely on. And if you think about it now, if you look at lots of top business leaders around the world, they all look in good shape. They all look healthy. Doesn't necessarily mean they look healthy, but it's very rare that you'll see somebody who's significantly overweight, for example. And that's because the stress and strain that those guys are under, you need to be physically fit to be able to cope with that these days.
And I could corroborate exactly what you're saying, have discovered that myself in leadership I had to sometimes step back for a while and focus on myself to be able to move forward in the business, because I wasn't a healthy physical person, and that affected my mind and it affected my business. And now that I'm focusing on that, I'm starting to see the business processes also following me as well. So it's huge what you're doing. I think it makes a lot of sense, and it's actually really exciting to see those two come together and what you're doing there. So was it hard for you or hard for your peers to see you make this jump into this? Did you get a lot of like, don't do this, Lee, this is crazy?
I wouldn't say so. Actually, now, if we're talking about business and we're talking about coaching here, strength and conditioning is the title. It's a very, very competitive industry. In the UK, for example, I worked in top level rugby, so there's only 12 teams. So really, there's probably only, let's give or take, probably 30 to 40 positions of my job, okay, across the whole UK, and that's obviously now worldwide. So it's a very competitive market to work in, if that's what you want to do. So now I definitely see there's a shift, and you're thinking, right, what's my skill set? Where can I go and help people and coach? Because that's my passion. My passion is in coaching. I've been coaching since I was 17. I started off working, teaching little kids how to swim, and just got so much kind of reward from seeing that skill development, and that led on to sports science degrees and masters, etc., etc. And that element is helping me deliver in a different environment. And now I see there's lots of guys that I know who we will work together or in different clubs or whatever, have now made the shift across, because we see that there's a huge opportunity to support and help people with a bit of a different thinking, basically.
So talking a little bit maybe about your early career, just a slight distraction for a moment. Did you play any professional sports?
No, but I wasn't the greatest at school. I'd put it that way. It just didn't really appeal to me. But my highlights of the week were sports. Whether that was in lesson or after school or Saturday mornings or Sundays or whatever it was. I just wanted to play any sport and every sport. So I played to a decent level with a few different sports, and then that kind of it kind of set me up for having an all-rounded situation, because in my field or my past field in strength and conditioning, there are some coaches out there that will just stay in one sport for the whole career. They'll just work in NFL, they'll just work in football or rugby or whatever, and that's great. But there also is a element of or benefit of working in different sports, seeing a different culture, working abroad, seeing how things work differently. And that's definitely helped me better understand the context of the people that I work with now. So I'm fortunate enough to work with Americans, with people, in Asia, Europeans, and hopefully have a better understanding of, that the American work culture is very different to, Western Europe or Asia. I've been fortunate enough to travel to America to deliver workshops, to travel to, Tokyo and Singapore, and deliver in different environments, and just be like, wow, look at the way that, leaders are respected or praised or dealt with. Japan is just unbelievable culture for that, in terms of, people standing up and bowing when the leader comes in, and all those nuances that you need to understand when you're coaching in those companies.
Yeah.
Last year,
Okay.
The idea probably came in 2017 when I was talking to a client, and we were talking about athletes, and you need to think like an athlete, and then it just popped into my head. I'm like, actually, you're a cognitive athlete, i.e. your brain is the thing that's performing. So we need to work as hard as we can in all the different areas. And in terms of the one thing, for me, it's been a complete, obviously COVID hit. So, you change roles, you move out from being in a team environment to being on your own. And it has been the biggest learning curve ever. As in my industry, or my past industry, we didn't do a sales marketing module. It was never talked about how to network. It was never talked about branding and creating sales funnels and all this stuff. So the last 18 months have just been the biggest learning curve to really develop skill sets, because as
Yeah.
you're
having to exercise your mind too. You're learning all these new things.
I'm an accountant, I'm a marketer, I'm a sales guy, I'm a web guy, I'm all these, video production, podcast production. You just kind of develop this whole new skill set that now it's good, because when you're, as I said, I'm not a business coach, but when you're talking to people, you have a better understanding when, my business guys talk about profit and loss and return on investment and revenue and branding and all those areas that you kind of, you're not an expert, but you see into an insight into it. So that's been the biggest thing over the last year, is just like, wow, there's lots to learn.
Welcome to being an entrepreneur. You learn it or you die, it seems like. So what is a common myth about coaching that you run into?
I suppose a common myth is that coaches have all the answers, and and that coaches are the people that tell you what to do, whereas actually what coaching is about is asking the right questions, is supporting that individual. I go in and I work with some very intelligent senior people. They know much more about their business. They know much more about their industry than I ever will. So they've got the resources in them. It's just asking the right questions for them to access the resources. And if you've noticed that probably some of the things you do in life are because you've come to that decision. And that's the point of coaching, is to get to people, to get them to make not necessarily get them to make the right decision, but just make them a decision that they're happy with. So I think that's probably the biggest myth, is that, I've worked with loads of people who are like, why is this not working? You need to be telling me what I need to be doing. And I'm like, no, it doesn't work like that. Everybody's an individual. I'm helping you to find your way, and that's important.
Yeah, it's so true. Drawing what they already are out of them. That's really what you do. So, we talked in prep that you specifically like to target dads, fathers, and tell me and our audience, which I love, is why you focus on that market segment specifically. It's not the only market you will work with, but that's one of your targets. Tell us about that.
Um, so how it came about was that I'm a passionate, business person. I'm trying to drive the coaching business forward, but then I'm also, a father of two. One's like 16 weeks and one's 5, and all that goes about it. And I was just like, well, I'm sure there are other dads in similar situations. So over the last 5 months or so, I've carried out some research where I've interviewed over 50 business owners who are dads and have 2 or more children, to really dig deep about what's their frustrations, what's their fears, what's going on, what tactics are they using, what methods have they used, what mistakes have they made, to get a better understanding of what's going on. And I think that as a male, we're quite kind of closed off to open up about that thinking. We obviously the business and the work landscape has significantly changed, over the last 30-40 years, and rightly so. And obviously with COVID now, there's definitely a bigger discussion about flexibility, about dads being able to take their kids to school and all the positive things. But I still feel there's this kind of like, you've got to drive, you've got to push. And lots of the conversations I have it's like, yeah, my biggest fear is that I'm not creating relationships with my kids when they're young, so that by the time hopefully my business is successful, I don't know them, I don't get them. And if you think about it, we all have lots going on, and it's trying to work out a way to be not necessarily more productive, but be a better human, and to kind of, yeah, make sure that you as a dad are physically active, you're a strong individual, you've got time for your kids, you're engaged with what they're doing, you're not thinking about the business, and when you're on the business, you're not thinking about your family or your kids. And that's how it kind of come about. And it's been a hugely frustrating, hugely inspiring kind of journey over the last 5 months or so.
Yeah, and I think that's so important, being a father myself and understanding that struggle of trying to find that balance of, you want to do it all, and you need to do it. You want to show that example, and these are good things. How do you find that balance? I think it's so important. So tell us, what would you say is the biggest challenge you're facing in this business of cognitive athlete?
Well, I probably, it's like, it's speaking to people, it's getting leads, it's kind of having these conversations. If you look at the sales triangle, I think it's like 3% of the people are actively looking for the thing you're selling. And for me, it's like, right, the next chunk of people is to speak to these dads and work with these dads that are busy, and they, is to kind of say, hey, look, I'm here to support you, I want to help you. And it's to have these conversations with these highly ambitious individuals that are pushing themselves forward. And likewise with the stuff that I do in pure business, it's to speak to CEOs and to get access to them, because probably my social platform is LinkedIn, and I've seen since COVID that everybody is there selling and selling and selling. So it's really difficult, or it's really important to get your message clear and to speak to the right people. So that's been the biggest thing, that I think that you have a message and you keep always enhancing it and tweaking it and getting it better. I think that takes time. And again, not a salesperson, I'm not a marketeer. So it's been a long learning process. And I'm not sure I'm there, and I'm not sure you ever get there.
Yeah, that takes a lot of work in itself, and perhaps almost even another coach in itself on some of those sales and marketing things that you must do. So, looking at your whole career, not just cognitive athlete, what would you say is the most important lesson that you've learned?
To develop your implementation. And what I mean by that is, there's so much knowledge out there, and it's easy to go off to a certain degree and do a degree, do a master's, or whatever courses. But for me, it's like, right, looking back at it, the most important thing is reading something, going out and doing it, and giving it chance to be kind of productive, and then seeing how that works, as opposed to just this kind of drive to gather knowledge all the time. And I think back now to our internship program, and the best interns that come out of it were the ones that were always kind of willing, not necessarily, they're always willing to learn, of course, but they're the ones that were the best were the ones that were willing to kind of try and to implement, and not be afraid to make mistakes. I think that's a big important lesson, is that, especially in my previous role, is that I see so many young coaches really worried about making mistakes. When you're working with athletes, they're because the industry is fickle, and there's probably 100 people that would do your job, so you're quite wary of keeping it. So I'd probably say, hey, look, go out there, try things, make mistakes, and learn from it, because that's how you grow, and that's how you develop.
Good, interesting, and good stuff there. So I'd like to maybe look into your research a little bit, if you're willing to share. You said you interviewed 50 business leaders. In your opinion, or from the data that you got, what would you say is the most important personality trait somebody needs to be a business leader?
There's lots that come to mind. I wouldn't say there's one.
Okay.
But I really think that, and again, it depends on the industry, but awareness and self-awareness is a really big aspect of how you go about being a leader. And when I'm talking about leader, I'm not talking about just in the boardroom or in the office. I'm talking about how you are as a leader, as a dad, as a husband, or a wife, or whoever it may be. Is having that awareness of how you come across to people, and how to develop that awareness in other people. Basically, some of the best leaders I have it, I'm sure it's a skill that they've developed, but it's definitely, they have it hand over fist. You can just see them working through how they're coming across, and what they're feeling, and kind of having that awareness when things are going wrong, so that their actions or reactions are from our intellectual part of our brain, not from our emotional part of our brain. I was fortunate to work with some amazing, head coaches, and some of them you could see were emotional guys that would fly off the handle and lose themselves, and you're just like, wow, stay clear of this guy, and just don't say anything to aggravate him. And then the other coaches who are like, yeah, they had an ability to stop, be aware of the situation, and then process it on an intellectual process, and they make the right decisions. I think that's tough, because in business, especially if it's your own business, someone said it's like my other child, and it's like, wow, okay, yeah, it's you spend a lot of time on your business, and it becomes part of you. So it's obvious that when feedback comes or things go wrong, to take it emotionally. But again, it's having that awareness to say, right, okay, what can I do better, or how am I going to get myself out of this, or where's the resources? If I haven't got them, who do I need to go speak to or get coached by?
If you were talking to somebody getting into coaching right now, what would be your piece of advice?
Wow. Don't do it. No. I think it would be is probably be really open to working in different environments, and very similar to working in different sports. Don't be afraid of going off and working in a different area or a different discipline. That yeah, you're not sure that you're going to get much out of it. You're always going to get something out of it. When I got shifted across to the corporate side, and there's some companies where you're like, this doesn't sound that exciting, but what you will do is you'll meet somebody who is really interesting, and I was fortunate enough to work with some non-government organizations, so lots of charities, and see their work and get a better understanding. And that was always a big part of one thing I wanted to do, was when I worked with individuals in companies, is to understand the company's culture, learn the language, all those types of areas that do. So if there's one piece of advice, it would be, look, be open to working in different cultures and different environments, because you're going to get so much out of it.
That's a good word there. So you've done coaching. That's been pretty much your whole career. Is there any other occupation you would like to try that you haven't tried yet?
I don't. That's an interesting one. I'm into cooking.
Wow.
So I was always like, chef is an area, and I was just like, wow, you think coaches work long hours? Chefs are up there with the dedication and what they put to it. But I really love that idea of how food is always developing, it's always changing, there's always something new, and that you can go out and experience again different environments, different cultures, and bring that back into it's amazing to watch coaching shows where they've gone off to travel to Mexico or India or some amazing places, and learn from that person, or that how to cook their original food and then bring it back. I've always found that fascinating. So maybe cooking, but not chefing.
Okay. Well, food plays an important part in the coaching, doesn't it? I mean, and the building the athlete and understanding how it affects your body. Am I correct?
Yeah. Obviously, our gut is our second brain, and if we feed the gut with healthy stuff, most of our happy neurochemicals, serotonin is produced in the gut. And unfortunately, the food that sometimes makes us feel happy is not great for our gut. It's unfortunately, yeah. So there's a definite link, to you are what you eat. It's true. I work with some high performers in business, and they now have a clear understanding of, like, right, if I want to be the best I can be, I need to feel myself very similar to an athlete. Maybe they don't need to eat the quantities that an athlete's eating, but yeah, they need to eat the quality for sure.
I think we could talk for hours about some of these things, Lee, but I do appreciate your time being here on the Journey podcast. Got a couple of rapid fire questions here at the end. It's really neat learning about what you're doing there, but what are 3 books you would recommend to the audience?
So 3 books. There's the One Thing by Gary Keller, which is a great book, and it's talking about, we understand that 80% of our results come from 20% of what we do. Well, actually, can we break that down even more and think about the one thing that we do? And the next book would probably be Atomic Habits by James Clear.
Good one.
Where he talks about this idea of compound self-improvement, and how we are is that we don't understand that the principles to become very good at something takes time, but it's just a case of just pushing slowly. And there's a novel called from a men's coaching point of view, I would probably look to a book called Backbone. I'm not sure who wrote it, but it's a real kind of interesting book around kind of the journey and how it's there, basically. So they're probably the three. There's lots more, but they're three.
Yeah. Always some more reading. I learn about a new book every single week on the Journey podcast, one I didn't hear of before. Okay. So you just started this business recently. So I think you're the closest, one of the closest to this. If somebody's starting a business, what's the words of wisdom you would give them today as they're beginning that journey?
Say, hey, patience. Just, things take time. Very successful people are not overnight successes. There's no such thing. There is hours of work and dedication of putting it in, and the comparison is the thief of joy, and that links in to patience, because it's so easy to get caught up and see what your friends are doing, or other companies or people in your space, and you can get very depressed or very annoyed with yourself quickly. So by just having that patience and just you're in your own journey, to quote the show, is that, hey, look, it's going to take you as long as it's going to take you. Obviously, hey, look, you have to work hard and you have to work smart, but just have the patience that it's going to come true.
Fantastic advice. Thanks, Lee, on that. All right. So I've asked you quite a few questions today. Is there any question you wish I would have asked you today?
Probably, what's my biggest mistake in coaching?
Oh, well, let's talk about that for a minute. I think that's an interesting, learn from our mistakes, right?
Biggest mistake is, as a young coach, not understanding the value, or it's not understanding the value of feedback, but learning how to take feedback. And again, when you're a young person and you're in your first job and you think, and you get that bit of feedback, you take it quite personally and quite negatively, and that emotional start of the brain kicks in and you miss the point of the feedback. So I'd say that would be my biggest thing, is that, hey, look, however bad the feedback is, however badly it's delivered, it's coming from a place that you need to improve.
Good word on that. Thank you. Yeah. All right, Lee, tell us a little bit about Cognitive Athlete. Is it all virtual? Can people from all over the world engage with you? How's that work?
Yeah, so it's I've always worked kind of remote based. It works for people's schedules. It works to speak to people who are super busy. I have a website called www.cognitiveathlete.co.uk. Happy if people want to connect with me on LinkedIn under my name, Lee Eldridge. And yeah, that's probably the two best ways to find out more about what I do and who I am and connect with me.
And you've got a podcast that people can go listen to as well?
Yes, it's called Cognitive Athlete, yeah, whereby we speak to lots of different people, athletes and business CEOs and some solo casts and all those different types of things, yeah.
Awesome. Go check out Lee Eldridge, cognitiveathlete.uk.co, and learn more about Cognitive Athlete. I've listened to his podcast. It's some really interesting content on there, lots to learn. Lee is just a wealth of knowledge about coaching and how to help your business. It's been great spending some time with you here today, Lee, and I certainly hope that we can continue the conversation as we continue to network together.
Perfect. Yeah. Thanks for your time today. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah. Thanks, Lee.